Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Morning. Hello. Welcome to the S Worlds Festival, and specifically, welcome to the first day of our series of talks. My name's Ed. I'm just the host. I'm not important at all. So I'm just sort of trying to keep control of things, and we'll be meeting our first speaker of the day in just a moment. There's just a few little things that we're going to talk about before that. We have some capacity potentially for the exhibitions. I don't know if everybody's seen the exhibitions already or they're planning to go, if they've already got tickets or not. It's free, of course, but it's ticketed because there's limited capacity. If you haven't, then the best thing to do is to scan the little brochures here, the little QR code, to see if there are still tickets available. Weirdly, this will be the weirdest part, hopefully. Everything else will go smoothly. But weirdly, we might have to get you to leave this building and come back into the same building, but through a slightly different entrance, because that's where the queue will be. This is all part of our sort of COVID restrictions and all that sort of thing. So that's a bit of an annoyance straight up. But if you haven't seen those exhibitions, they are super cool. So please, I do encourage you to go and have a look at that. Anyway, nobody wants to hear more about health and safety stuff. So we'll meet our first speaker of the day. Now, I'm going to read this because I want to make sure that I'm getting this correct. Our speaker is Henry Burgess, and he is the head of, so we'll get this in the right order, head of the National Environment Research Council, it's NERC, the Arctic Office, which is hosted by the British Antarctic Survey. The office is physically in Svalbard in Norway. Everybody's still keeping track, yes? Good. Okay, good. And that supports UK Arctic research activity, advice for policy, and develops international scientific collaboration across all aspects of Arctic research. So today, Henry is going to be talking to us about life in the Arctic, science, nature, and us. And I think, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Henry.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate kind of having such a young and also mature audience, a mixed audience. That's really great to see you all. Thank you very much for being here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Arctic, basically. And as Ed said, we do have a stand upstairs. If you would like to come to the exhibition, we can talk more about kind of what we do in the Arctic. So I'd like to give you a snapshot of the life in the Arctic, science, nature, and us. This is me at our Arctic station, and I'm going to be using our Arctic station to tell you a little bit about kind of life in the Arctic and what we do, and introducing you to some of the animals and some of the science and the cool things we do there. But first, just to get us going, because it's the first talk of the day, and just to do a bit of a quiz on Arctic animals. So, north is that way, and south is that way. The North Pole is about 2,500 miles that way, so a long way. The South Pole is about 9,500 miles in the other direction. So I'm going to put up some animals, and I'd like you to point to where you think they come from. So if they come from the North Pole, point north to the front of the auditorium, and if they come from the south, point kind of behind you. And if you're too shy to point, just incline your head in one way or the other. So first test is this animal. Very good. Everyone's pointing north. Yeah, so we get these animals around the station. I'll show you some pictures in a bit about kind of when we've seen them quite close to the station. What about this animal? A walrus. This is a shy walrus. He's slightly kind of hiding his eyes. People aren't quite so confident. Some people are pointing backwards, but most forwards. So this is a walrus. They only live in the Arctic. We have some of these near the station, but they only live in the Arctic. You get elephant seals, things like that, in the Antarctic, 9,000 miles that way. But these ones are all a couple of thousand miles that way. Or around Ireland or Pembrokeshire, when that one kind of floated kind of nearer over the summer. What about these ones? These are Adelie penguins. These live, that's right, everyone's pointing south. So these are thousands of miles that way in the Antarctic. What about this one? So this is an orca, otherwise known as a killer whale, but orca is a better name for it. So people are pointing to the north, and some people pointing to the south. And if you're pointing both ways, then that's right. So these live in the north, and they also live in the south. They don't move between. They are distinct populations. So the ones that live in the south permanently live in the south, and the ones that live in the north permanently live in the north. This is, I think, taken in Antarctica. you can see the whale has popped up, and it's what they call spy hopping. So it's coming up to see what's around. And can you see on the far right-hand side of the image there, there's a seal. So it's looking at the seal, that brown object. That's what it's looking for, not the person. But I think it's taken this guy kind of completely by surprise. But that's a good image. So these are both north and south, but they don't move between them. What about this one? This is Vulpes lagopus, otherwise known as the Arctic fox. So these only live in the north. This is taken just around our station in Svalbard. So these are the puppies. They can have very big litters. They can have up to 20. But it's unusual to have as many as that, but this is more typical. And they're like this in the summer, then in the winter they go completely white to blend in with the snow. So these only live in the Arctic that way. And then what about this one? This is the final one. This is a tern. So some people are pointing south, some people are pointing north. If you're pointing both ways, then you're right. So these are Arctic, Antarctic terns, and a large proportion of them will migrate between the two. So they'll never see a winter. They spend the summer in the Arctic, and then they fly all the way from 2,000 miles that way to the best part of 9,000 miles that way. And so they live in both parts. So that's an introduction to some of the wildlife and the animals of the Arctic. But I also want to talk about humans in the Arctic. Because we think about the wildlife, but the Arctic is a populated place. And this image, which is owned by the National Maritime Museum, but is out for restoration at the moment rather than being on display, is how a lot of people, I think, thought about the Arctic who didn't live in the Arctic for a long time. So this is William Barrett. He discovered the Svalbard archipelago, which we'll be talking about, but he didn't live much longer after discovering it. So there are 16 people in this photograph, and only 12 of them survived. They died after a shipwreck and exposure and bear attack and other things. So for a long time, this is how people thought about the Arctic. It was a place of exploration, it was a place of danger, it was a place where you went to be a hero, and if you came back, you were lucky, and if not, this kind of thing would happen. But the Arctic is very much a place of humans these days. There are big cities in the Arctic. There are indigenous communities, Inuit, Sami, Nenets people who live in the Arctic. There are 4 million people that live north of the Arctic Circle, and 1 in 10 of those are indigenous communities, people that trace their ancestry and their connection back to the land and the way of life of living on the land. The Arctic is not just not just ice and snow and glaciers, it's also green. This is in Alaska and northern Canada, this kind of scrubland. And the Arctic is increasingly a place of tourism. This is the Crystal Serenity ship that went through the northwest. So the Arctic is a place of tourism, and all these things are true and real parts of the Arctic. But what I wanted to talk to you about, particularly today, was our station in Svalbard. So the red dot is the North Pole. We are the red star down at the bottom, and that yellow circle there is Svalbard, otherwise known as Spitsbergen, and that's where we have the UK's only permanent Arctic research facility. So the ship that you may have seen in the Thames, that can go to the Arctic, but it also goes south and does other things all around the world. But our only permanent facility is here in Svalbard, our research station. And it's in this place, Ny-Ålesund, right on the western coast of Svalbard. And it's a really interesting place to be, because when you think of the Atlantic Ocean, which is kind of down here, and all that warm water is coming up past Svalbard into the Arctic Ocean. So all the changes that you see in Svalbard, and this place is warming 2-3 times quicker than the rest of the world. All those changes are happening in this part of the world particularly quickly, which makes it a really interesting, sadly, place to visit and to study. So this is our station in the fjord here, and it's a place that you may know about through this film and Philip Pullman and his book. So this is the Golden Compass, his Dark Materials series. So Svalbard, Spitsbergen was the place of the polar bears where they would live. And we do have a lot of polar bears on Svalbard. There are 2,000 people, roughly, that live in Svalbard. It's about the same size as Scotland. Most of it is snow and glacier and ice. But there are more bears than people. So 3,000 bears-ish live around Svalbard. And they do come and visit the station occasionally. This is how people get there. So you can get a regular flight from Heathrow into Oslo or to Tromsø in northern Norway, and then you get a shuttle up to Longyearbyen, which is the main airport, and then this is the plane you get in for the final hop to Ny-Ålesund and our station. Everyone gets a window seat. That's what it looks like inside the plane. So when you take visitors up there, you say, give us 10 quid and I'll get you a window seat. But everyone gets a window seat, and that's guaranteed. It's quite cold on the plane, so everyone's wearing their coats and their jackets and hats and all of that kind of thing. And there's no door, so you can see the pilot, and they fly relatively low. So, whoa, that's loud. So this is what you would see outside the window. This is flying from Longyearbyen to our station. These mountains are about 1,000 metres high, something like that. So think of it a bit like the Lake District or Scotland. And all the snow there, you can see, is overlying glaciers. So this is snow that's fallen over decades, hundreds of years, and is forming the glaciers that cover most of Svalbard, and it's all slowly flowing out to the sea. So on a clear day in the summer, this is what you would see. Often it's foggy or cloudy, and you can't see it. But on a really good day, this is what you can see. And this is what it's like when you get there. This is drone footage of the community. So you can see all these little buildings and that kind of concrete bit at the end. And weirdly, it's an old coal mining community. So the Norwegians mined coal here, and now it's an international research station. We have our station here, so do the Chinese, the Japanese, Koreans, Germans, French, lots of different countries. And it's a real hub, a real international community for doing science. No one lives there permanently. People might be there for a couple of years, but no one lives kind of longer than that. But it's more or less the nearest permanently established establishment to the North Pole. It's about just over 1,000 kilometers from here to the North Pole. And this is what our station looks like. So if you'd like a tour, I can't physically take you to the station, but I can show you some footage of what the inside of the station looks like. So we'll give that a go.
Welcome to the UK's Arctic Station here in Johannesson, Svalbard. I'm Henry Burgess from the National Maritime Research Council Arctic Office. Come inside the station and have a look. So this is the boot room. This is where we take all our boots off to make sure we keep the outside out and the inside in. It's usually a bit tidier than this, but we've had a lot of people here over the last week or so. This is the centre of the station. This is where people sign in and out, where we keep the radios, where we do the briefings. And I'll show you the laboratory. Just through here. We've got our team from the University of Manchester with their meteorite hunting equipment. And on this side, we have what's normally our sitting room, but for now it's been turned into a BBC Radio 4 Today programme studio. They've just finished broadcasting for this week, and they're packing up all their gear. If you come down this way, come on, keep it quick. This is the station manager's office. He lives in there. And then we have the team from the BBC Today programme. They're just packing up. They've got all their gear here. This is Tom Fielden from the BBC. He's washing up before we go. Come down the end here. These are all the bedrooms. We've got 7 bedrooms. This is my room. It's quite small but functional, perfectly good enough for a couple of weeks. And then you come into where we keep all the big kit. So this is the garage. We have our boats in here. This is what we use for getting out into the fjord and making sure we can access all the different sites. And then this is our field store. So all the stuff we need to keep people safe is in here. The big boots, the jackets, the crampons, all that kind of thing. All the things to keep people as safe as we can in this environment.
I hope that gives you a sense of what it's like, that station. So it's everything that you need all in that one building. It's your bedrooms, it's where you keep the boat, it's where you keep all your mountaineering gear, it's where we keep the rifles for protecting against polar bears, it's the laboratories, it's everything is in that one building. And all the other stations from the different countries are all similar to that. We all eat together in one big mess hall, one big kind of canteen, if you like, from the different places. But everyone lives and works in their own little buildings. But people do cooperate and work together. And this is how you get around. In the winter and the spring, this is a Skidoo, like the one out the front. This is a Norwegian one. You can see on the back there, there's the gun case for carrying the rifle. So whenever you go out from the station, more than a couple of 100 yards, you have to go out with a radio, with a flare gun to scare off a bear if you see one, and in the end, if you need it, a rifle. No bears have been shot by scientists from our station, and no bears have hurt anyone from our station in the 30 years that we've had the station. And almost everything we do is about preserving that record, is to make sure we keep people safe and also to keep the bears safe. All the bears are protected in Svalbard, so they can't be hunted. If you see one when you're out doing your field work, then it's the responsibility on you to take yourself away from the situation and to protect the bear. But if it comes to it, then you have to be able to protect yourself and the people that you are with. So in the winter and in the spring, this is how people get around. And it is serious. So as you come to the edge of town, there are these signs, and you're not allowed to go out without being kind of equipped to make sure that you can stay safe. And this is a bear that we saw a couple of seasons ago. And we were going out in the boat to drop people off at a field site. You can see this is the beach just behind you in the fjord. And you have to make sure that you are kind of looking quite carefully before you land people. Because once you land people and then drop them off there, they could be there for half a day. And these bears can go 30, 40 kilometers in a day walking around. So you have to be really careful that they're not there. So they just waited around for 5 minutes and a big bear came along, and that's your day finished. You have to go back and call it quits. The bear is looking for seals that might be on the shore, or walruses that are washed up dead. They like those. They will be like a meal for months and months as they are decomposing and the bears are getting into them. So bears are often seen. This is a big male, probably, I don't know, 700-800 kilos, something like that, maybe, a big bear. But it's not just down on the shore that we're doing the science, we're also up on the glaciers. So the station is surrounded by these big glaciers that are feeding down onto the coast, but also into the sea itself. This is one that's on land. So this is a kind of a classic view looking up the glacier, and you can see the start of a crevasse, a hole there, into the glacier. So people are very keen to have a look into those to see what they can see. And what they're looking for are places like this. So this is, I think, the same glacier that they've come down. I think it's the same image. And what they are particularly looking for is what's growing on the surface of the ice. So you think of the ice and the snow as relatively neutral, relatively inert. But actually, there's all kinds of algae and plant life, very small plant life, that grows on the surface of the ice. And as the temperature warms and as the ice changes its kind of dynamics, there is increasing thought about what will happen to those bits of algae that live on the ice surface. Because if they are dark, then they're helping to absorb sunlight. And if they're absorbing sunlight, they're absorbing warmth, and that's potentially melting the glaciers more quickly. So understanding about the kind of the flora, the plant life that lives within glaciers and on the surface is really interesting and important. And we support a lot of this science at the station. But we also get out in the boats. So that noise you can hear is not the boat particularly, that's the boats bumping through these bits of ice. So all this ice has come off the glacier you can see behind and is sort of hanging around in the fjord, ready to be washed out with the tide and the wind. This is a glacier that's retreated quite a lot in the last decade or so. It was coming up to what we thought was a peninsula, but as it's retreated, you can see that that peninsula was actually just an island, and the glacier has pulled back. This is being affected by climate change, as all the glaciers in Svalbard are, but some of the glaciers in Svalbard are what they call surging glaciers, so they have a natural cycle that's independent of climate change. And this is where they speed up and lose a lot of their mass, and then they will suddenly kind of retreat backwards. So this is a surging glacier behind us. So some of those images that you see of this is what a glacier used to look like 100 years ago, and now this is what it looks like. Some of those will be because it's a surging glacier, which is a natural rhythm independent of climate change. But regardless of that, all the glaciers in Svalbard are retreating because of climate change. So this is the kind of work that people do out on the boats. They're trawling. These are trawl nets, so they will drag these behind the boats, looking at the small creatures that live in the seawater, and also getting into the bottom of the fjord. The fjord is deep, several hundred meters deep in lots of places. So they're dragging out the mud and all the creatures that live in the bottom and studying what happens to those creatures, what new creatures are coming in with the warmth of the ocean, and what lives there is really interesting and important to us. We're also looking at what grows on land, and this is a typical view about parts of around Ny-Ålesund, where our station is. So these chambers are actually made of the same kind of plexiglass that you use for police riot shields. So they have to survive the winter and the wind. They get buried in snow in the winter. And the idea is you raise the temperature of the ground by half a degree, and it mimics the kind of conditions that we will see in the next decade or so. And you see what the plant life is doing and how much more it grows and all those kinds of things. So we have a few of these sites dotted around where the station is. This isn't our station, this is the French-German station, but Ny-Ålesund is a really good place to study the sky. And this is a LiDAR, an upward-facing radar, and it's studying kind of the atmospheric properties from the station. So there's a range of different things you can do from Ny-Ålesund, kind of science in the station itself, science on the glacier, science out in the boat, and in this kind of high-end atmospheric science as well. This isn't our ship. But this is a German ship, Polarstern. And I wanted to show you this one in the last couple of slides, just to talk about how science is also done, of course, from ships, not just from our station. So this ship, the Polarstern, was sent a couple of years ago right into the heart of the Arctic Ocean. This is a photograph from that expedition, where the idea is that they would find a big ice flow, moor up against it, turn the engines off, and just be there all winter to see what happened, basically, and to study the connections between the deep water, the ice, and the atmosphere, because there haven't really been ships, not recently, that have spent the winter in the polar night in the Arctic Ocean. So the idea is it would just drift across the top of the Arctic with the transpolar drift. And this is what it looked like in the middle of winter. So the ice here is sea ice, it's not the land. It's probably a meter and a half or so of ice, and then you've got the thousands of meters of the Arctic Ocean below you. And they were there for a whole year, throughout the polar night and throughout the kind of the permanent daylight as well, doing a range of science, putting things into the ocean, flying helicopters, drones, balloons, all kinds of things. This is called the Mosaic expedition. And there was a film about it on Channel 4 a couple of weeks ago, which I think should still be available. We had lots of British scientists on this boat. So I wanted to show you an image of what it's like in the middle of the winter. You've seen it in the summer, and in the winter, it would look a bit like this. The film I'm going to show you is not from this expedition. It's from a Norwegian one a couple of years before that was not in quite the same location, but similar. But it gives you a sense of what it would be like to be out in the middle of the Arctic Ocean in the polar night, in the cold, and coming back to the ship. So here they are on their Skidoos, and they've been out doing their science, and they're coming back to the ship. And the light you can see on the right-hand side there is the ship. It's a searchlight, and you can see the wooden stakes and the rope on the right-hand side. And that's in case the weather really comes in and there's a blizzard and you get lost, and you just have to follow those lines, that rope, physically holding it to get back to the ship. So again, what they are skidooing over is just sea ice. You can see where it's mounded up and kind of rafted, where it's compressed together. So a meter and a half, and then it's the Arctic Ocean, kind of all the way down below you. You see the rifle on his back to protect against bears. And then they've come home. They've come back to the ship. And that'll be their home for all the months that they were there. So thank you very much. That's kind of what I wanted to say. This is a really cool website if you're interested. It's a GCSE geography website. So if you want to know more about the Arctic in general and about our stations and things, this is a good place to go. And the website down below is our website. So thank you very much for your patience and for your interest. I'm very happy to take any questions if there's time. And if you would like to come and see us at our Arctic stand, please do. You'd be very welcome. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Henry. That was absolutely amazing. Folks, we have just a few minutes to do a bit of a Q&A session. Does anybody have any questions? This is a great chance to ask.
What's a cool way to remember which is the north of the globe and which is the south of the globe between the Arctic and the Antarctic? An easy way to remember the difference between the two.
I would remember it in that the Arctic comes from the Greek word arctos, which is bear, I think. So you know that polar bears live in the north, and so that's arctos, the bear, and that's the Arctic. And then the Antarctic is ant, so the opposite to that. Is that helpful? Polar bears,
that's how
arctos.
I remember it as an ant being very low, very small, way down the bottom.
Oh, okay, that's it. That's better. Yeah, that's better. So ants, tiny down the bottom, bears, big. Yeah, okay, that's all right. I'll remember that.
I like that as well.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Up there, there's bears. Down there, no bears.
Yeah.
That's a good way of doing it. Yeah?
How do you become a scientist working in the Arctic? What's your sort of career story?
Yeah, so I'm not a scientist. I used to be a civil servant. I worked for the Foreign Office in the Polar Regions Department, and I've done all kinds of different jobs in government. And then there was an opportunity to work for the British Antarctic Survey, promoting what scientists do, or what our scientists do in the Arctic. So my career has been very accidental, really. But the classic scientist career would be that you're interested in science at school, you do a science degree, and then you do a further degree, and probably you do a PhD, so you become a doctor, and then you would work on an expedition, or you would work on a ship, or come to our station, and then you would kind of progress that way. But we're really keen to make sure that there are opportunities for people kind of really early in their career. So you don't have to think right at the start, I want to be an Arctic scientist. You just need to think, I'm interested in what happens in the world, I'm interested in animals, I'm interested in how things work, and then we can show you how you can translate that enthusiasm to the Arctic. So we run courses at our station for people that are partway through their training and their learning to come and spend time at the station, learn some more skills, get interested in the Arctic and take it that way. So, but in the early stages, just be interested in what's going on and kind of have an inquiring mind. That's how all scientists start, I think.
Could I just follow up on that slightly? You'd mentioned some of the there's about 2,000 inhabitants. Presumably there are also people like, say, chefs for the canteen and mechanics who are not research scientists, right? There's a whole community.
Yeah. So there's 2,000 people in the whole of Svalbard, so the whole of, that's kind of Scotland equivalent. In this community at any one time, probably 100, 150, something like that. But absolutely, you can live temporarily and work your career in the Arctic or the Antarctic, and you can be a scientist, or you could be an engineer, or a chef, or a boat driver, or a polar bear guard, or a doctor, or all those kind of different things. Anything that you could do in life, you could do in the Arctic or the Antarctic, I think.
Yeah.
Have you noticed over the years that polar bears population decline?
I'm not an expert in polar bears, but there's around, I think, 30,000 polar bears roughly in the world. Some populations they know a lot about, and other populations not. The bears in Svalbard, Spitsbergen, are quite well studied, and those numbers have increased somewhat in the last decades because polar bears were hunted commercially in Svalbard until the late 60s, early 70s, when an act came in to protect them. And I think the numbers are still rebounding in Svalbard. So we don't see bears here in the winter because they're on the east, either denning with their cubs or looking for seals. But they come here in the summer and they're looking for dead walruses, or they go underneath the bird cliffs and they wait for chicks to fall down, or they're raiding eggs and those kind of things. So I think we're seeing more bears come through here in the summer, but that might be because the bears are learning from the cubs are learning from their mother that in the summer they can go along the beach and they can find some birds and fox cubs or eggs or other things. So, but yeah, polar bears in Svalbard are not at the moment in particular trouble, I think. Yeah.
Okay, we've got time for just one or two more. I think what I would like to do is make sure we get a couple of questions from the kids as well. I think that's important. If we can go to this young lady here.
Do you ever get worried that you might get hurt on the expedition?
I know what you mean, and you've got to be very careful. So whenever people come to our station, we make sure that they are fit when they come, so they have to pass quite a strict medical, so they come healthy. And you always need to think about what you're going to do at the start of the day. And it's the weather that rules everything that you do. So you have to know really what the weather is going to do. Because if you're going out in a boat and it gets windy, or if you're going out on the glacier and it gets foggy, then that's when things can happen. So you have to think all the time, what could go wrong and how can I get out of that situation? But accidents do happen, but we have a good track record at this station. But as long as you constantly are worried a little bit and thinking about it, then that's a good way to stay safe. It's people that don't worry too much or get like overconfident, think, oh, I've done this once, I can do it again. It's kind of that's when it's more worrying. You need to kind of just be constantly thinking about how to keep yourself safe. But no, I've never felt personally in danger. But I think if you were our station manager, who has been here a long time, he tells a story about when he was out on the sea ice when it was frozen, and it was quite foggy, and he saw a bear ahead of him. And he said that's the only time he's been really, really worried, because he knew that if the bear came for him, he would have to do something. And then he was worried for himself and he was also worried for the bear. So, good question.
It's a great question. Okay, I think we've got time for one last question. I think this young lady had her hand up.
It hasn't for me, but you do have to be careful. So you know those images when you saw people on the rope down in the glacier? You have to be really careful because sometimes you can be traveling along a glacier on a snowmobile or a skidoo, and the snow kind of filled in one of those holes, and it just looks smooth, and then you're going down. So you have to be really, really careful. So what they will do is they will send someone up who really knows what they're doing, and they'll put some canes, like garden canes, in the snow to mark a safe route, and then you can follow that safe route. But you always have to be thinking about it. And when they're going a long way on glaciers, you can have a special radar that fits on the front, special machine that fits on the front of the skidoo and looks downwards and can tell you if you're about to go over a hole. So that's a good way of doing it.
Brilliant. Well, folks, I'm sure you agree with me that we could be here all day asking you questions, but I'm afraid we are basically out of time. So first of all, can we thank Henry once again for...
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Just a reminder, first of all, of course, we've got all the exhibits outside. So please do check them out. If you don't already have a ticket, then please speak to a member of staff and we'll try and get that sorted. It has been incredibly popular and we do have limited capacity, so I can't promise anything, but please do ask and we'll see what we can do. The other thing is this is just the first of 3 days worth of talks, so if you're interested in more stuff, we've got all sorts of things going on. Just a little bit, it's the 21st century after all. If you want to send us any pictures you take on Twitter, we're at RM Greenwich, and we'd love to see pictures you've taken of you interacting with the exhibits. And we also have the @Arctic_office, which is which is the Arctic office. So if you want to tweet them and see how much, and actually please tell them how much you've enjoyed the talk, that would be great. And I think we're also using #IceWorlds just to spread things around because we're really keen on interacting with you on social media. So thank you so much, Henry. That was absolutely great. Thanks everybody for coming. Please do check out all the rest of the stuff we've got here and at the museum in general and across the Royal Museums Greenwich sites. Hopefully we'll see some of you for other talks during the day. But otherwise, I'm afraid I have to shoo you out.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.